What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello and welcome to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and joining me now in studio while Eddie Connor is on tour, we have famed astrologer Rachel Lang and radio personality Captain Ron. We have a special treat for our Truth Be Told fans. Our guest tonight is a very talented author and toxicologist by trade. Johan Calleman joins us tonight to explain his latest book, The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, The Quantum Evolution of Consciousness. What does that mean and how does it relate to the Mayans? Well, Carl will reveal how the Mayan calendar provides a blueprint for these consciousness downloads throughout history. His book examines the mind shift in humans and the development of pyramids and civilizations in ancient Egypt, South America, and Asia beginning in 3115 BCE. Carl was born in Sweden. He broke down his career in phases. First phase was training and practicing as a scientist. Second phase was dedicating the understanding of the ancient Mayan calendar. And now let's find out what the third phase is directly from him. So this is going to be a great conversation, and we hope our live listeners will have questions that we can ask Carl throughout the show. So please welcome famed author and our new friend on Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. We have Johan Calleman. Oh, welcome, Carl. How you doing?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that welcome.
We always get the giggles.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be a great interview because we all love Mayan history and Mayan calendar. And,
No doubt.
And Rachel Lang and Captain Ron's here. We all are going to be diving in and asking you questions. But first, we have to find out your journey. Toxicology and Mayan history does not usually go together. So I kind of want to know how did you get into this field?
Well, I think really I was kind of born with the Mayan thing as a kind of a mission, and but then there was a certain time also in my life that I needed to gather some kind of credibility and get some kind of scientific background and learn that particular trade. And so that's what I spent 20 years doing until 1993 or something like that. And I abandoned my previous career as a scientist, a laboratory scientist, and then decided to devote myself full time to what I really think is the mission of this particular life that I have. But there was even if it be true that I was born with it as a mission, there was a particular time when I, for the first time, visited the area in southern Mexico, in Yucatan and Chiapas and Guatemala, and for the first time saw not only met some Mayan people, but also saw some of the pyramid sites there, and that was really a really life-altering experience for me. Not that I immediately sort of turned into that particular career, if you like, but I understood at that point that was the purpose of my life, was to explore this and try to make sense of it, make it understandable for modern people, because after all, it's a fairly ancient calendar system that we're studying and retrieving to our present time. Mm-hmm. So that experience, that backpacking trip in 1979, that really was what sort of made me realize that here is something fundamental not only for humanity but also for myself, that this was something I should, whenever it became possible, start to devote myself to. And then after maybe 10 more years in traditional science, I decided to do this full time, the Mayan studies.
And where did you start with your study? Because in the books that you've written, there's great detail. So what was one of the first things that you actually kind of focused on?
Well, there are many things that are coming together in this. I've always had a great interest in history.
Mm-hmm.
Then, when I came to Mexico that first time that I mentioned, I learned about their particular calendar system and how that was based on assigning certain symbols, archetypes like animals or other deities or words to the particular time periods that the calendar was based upon. And so already there you have two components that are kind of interested. If you're interested in history, and then you know that they have time periods that they assign certain qualities to, the question arises in your mind, how do you match the two? Is there some kind of a reality here? Do their symbols of spiritual qualities of time, do that match what actually happened in human history? And those things came together. When I first came to Mexico in 1979, the Mayan calendar was almost unknown to people at large. And I remember the tour guides at Chichen Itza would ask questions. For instance, beginning of their so-called long count in 3115 BC, why was that their starting point? When we think about our own calendar, we know its starting point is supposed at least to be the birth of Jesus. And so it has a clearly defined starting point. But then the Maya had a starting point of their calendar, the long count calendar, that was about 3,100 years before that. And it sort of, the question came then to the mind, why did they choose it? And the tour guide or as all archaeologists at the time, they thought this is just sort of a mythological concept. They said there was no reality to it. There was no background, and that doesn't make sense because already then it was fairly well established that the first major civilizations on our planet arose around that time, around 3100 BC. That's when you have the very first dynasty in Egypt and several other kind of things. So something there was amiss in the official way of looking at it, in the fragmented way that official archaeology looks at these kind of things. And but the enigma was there, and I did have already quite some intuitive feeling that they really knew something. They had a calendar system that was very different from any other calendar on our planet, but that it was a very meaningful thing to study because it really tells you about where we come from and where we're going, because that's what their calendar is all about. It's the evolution over time.
So being a scientist, you must be very detailed, and in that journey of learning the Mayan calendar, how long did it take you to start understanding the symbols and what they meant, and being able to decipher the calendar, the beginning of the calendar?
Well, the symbols are not really in dispute in any particular sense.
Right.
So today, for instance, the quality in the sacred calendar is 6 wind, and that's a calendar that the contemporary Maya are still using. That's part of the system, and so deciphering them was not an issue, but really to correlate it with history, that's a big work, and you have to know also what to look for. At the beginning, history is a complex thing, and certainly when you study it in schools in the modern world, history is being presented as a very, very chaotic thing, like it's events and inventions and religions and all these kind of things were just appearing more or less randomly by accident, and that was the state of history, you might say, when I first approached these things. And I really had to go through it all to identify what were the key events and on what level would you see the effects of this kind of shifting energies, shifting symbols of that the Mayan calendar described. And this particular book is one of the books that is a result of that particular study to you might say extract what is really the important evolutionary factors of the human mind.
Right.
And so that's what I did.
So, go ahead.
Oh, no, well, I was just going to ask. So I've come from the background of Western astrology, and one thing that in Western astrology they look at is at big eras of time, like the age of Pisces, the age of Aquarius, the age of Aries, etc.
Yeah.
And a lot of those ages are based on the precession of the equinox. Was there anything similar in your research that you found with Mayan culture and the Mayan calendar?
Well, the Maya never mentioned the 26,000 year cycle that is the basis of European or Western astrology. So it's a different system. And there is a fundamental difference, as I may look upon it, between the kind of calendar that the Maya developed and the astrological systems that came out of Babylonia originally and developed to moved on either to India or to Europe. And the difference is that the Mayan calendar system is not based on any kind of astronomical cycles. And that is what makes it profoundly unique among the systems of timekeeping of our planet, because all over the world, in the rest of the world, the calendars are basically based on astronomical cycles, which in a sense sort of makes them dependent on cycles of physical bodies, you might say, the material changes that goes on. So in that sense, as far as I know, there is no other calendar system that is not based on either the revolution of the Earth around the Sun or the revolution of the Moon around the Earth, which are the most commonly basis for calendrical systems in the world. And to me, this is really what makes it so fascinating. When I first heard they have a 260-day calendar, and nobody can point to any kind of a physical correlate, any kind of astronomical cycle that would be able to, that would have a 260-day basis. So there's something else then that the Mayan system is based on. And that's really which made it very special and very curious for me to try to find out what is that.
Well, one thing that just a few years ago, 4 years ago, is when December 21st,
Right.
2012.
Yeah.
Everybody started. Well, not everybody. I didn't. Started panicking, saying the world's going to end. And I'm going to ask Carl and Rachel, since you're an astrologer, astrology-wise, what did that mean? And then Carl, what does that mean as a scientist doing research of showing the end of the Mayan calendar? So, Carl, I'll start with you, and then I'll ask Rachel. What did that mean in your research? Because still, people are like, okay, what it went by? What now?
Right, nothing happened. Right.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things to say about that. The first thing is that there's absolutely no Mayan source, whether contemporary or ancient, that would talk about the world coming to an end on December 21, 2012. So that's, I could say that's a lie, basically, that was widely spread. Or if I want to be a little bit more kind, I would say this is something that a lot of people made up because for some reason they were wired to think that way. There are a lot of people, and I think there are many significant apocalyptic traditions, especially in the Western world, and if people have a background in those, they might have been wired to interpret this particular date as the end of the world. But it's not true. There's none, absolutely nothing in the Mayan sources that talks about an end to the world. So that's part of it. The second thing I like to say is that it wasn't correctly dated. The shift date, the significant shift date in the Mayan calendar was a little bit more than a year before that. It was October 28, 2011. And that was the shift date. But when we're talking about the Mayan calendar system, which is basically divided into 9 different waves of different frequencies, we're talking about some waves that have really, really very long durations. The so-called long count calendar, which is the 6th level of the 9 waves, and started in 3115 BCE. It's sort of a wave movement with a peak and a valley as any kind of a sine wave movement. But one of these peaks is about 400 years long. So the whole idea that something would happen on a particular date was, is really tremendously far-fetched from a Mayan calendar perspective. And but nonetheless, something did happen. The world now is very different from only 5 or 6 years. And it's tremendously chaotic. And we do experience that there's been a speed up of time.
That's true.
And that's exactly what the Mayan waves of creation that they are describing, because each of these waves that have been sequentially activated from the very birth of the universe up to our present time has had a frequency that's been 20 times higher than the one that it's been standing on. So the new wave that was actually the 9th wave, the last of the 9 waves, or the highest of the 9th wave, was activated in 2011, in March of 2011 actually. That has brought a speed up of time, and there's been sort of for a while it didn't manifest. But now we're 5 years into this time after the shift, and we're starting to see a very chaotic breakdown of very much of the world that we used to know before 2011. So it's definitely something that is playing a big role in what's happening in the world today, but nothing in the. It's very, somebody who thinks that everything would change on a particular date means that is somebody who has not studied the Mayan calendar, because some of these waves have long durations, and we're talking about large-scale changes in human civilization that is manifesting through the effects of these different waves.
So, Rachel, as an astrologer, I'm sure you did a lot of work and looked up that date many times.
Definitely.
What did you find?
Well,
at least modern astrology.
Sure. Well, first of all, that was right. I mean, that was right at the solstice point when the sun's moving into Capricorn, and 2012 was the start of a pretty significant cycle astrologically, where we had Uranus, the planet of electricity and change and innovation and new ideas, squaring Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, and mass media, and corporations, all of those things. And so it was a time that where we all, I think personally, where it was an increase in consciousness. Around that time also, there were all these discoveries being made about new black holes and intergalactic discoveries about different galaxies. And I think anytime there's that kind of discovery or that kind of awareness that's coming into our collective consciousness and into our media, we're open. We have access to new electromagnetic frequencies, and certainly 2012 December especially, there were a lot of solar flares and a lot of solar storms and a lot of shakeup in terms of that kind of activity. But I think that the conversation about the Mayan calendar was something very separate from Western astrology. I mean, I think we tried to draw correlations, but the whole conversation around the end of the Mayan calendar was specifically about that.
Right, and I think that so many people are trying to tie the two in.
Yeah.
And they were wrong.
Yeah.
All right, so Carl, we're going to take a quick break. We've got to have our sponsors, but this has been such a great conversation. When we come back, I want to talk about the how our brains receive consciousness from the global mind. I just got to find out what the global mind is in the first place.
Good call.
So this is Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Tony Sweet.
Rachel Lang.
Captain Ron.
And we're talking with Carl Johan Calleman, and we're talking about his amazing book called Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, the Quantum Evolution of Consciousness. And we're going to be right back right after this break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
United States Pharmacopoeia, USP, sets the standard for most food supplements and are used in over 95% of all vitamin and mineral supplements in the world. The problem is that these products have never appeared in any living tissue. They're created in laboratories and are not recognizable to the body's metabolism. Grown by Nature products are different because they use renatured ingredients, proprietary blends of essential vitamins and minerals with cofactors of proteins, lipids, and complex carbohydrates. Over 50 studies have been conducted on renatured nutrients, and over 20 have been published in peer-reviewed journals proclaiming their superiority. As a result, Grown by Nature vitamins and supplements are now recognized as simply the best available. Call 877-817-9829. That's 877-817-9829 and order your Grown by Nature products today. We are what we eat, and since we are of nature, we should eat foods in their natural form. Only Grown by Nature offers a full line of renatured nutrients. Call 877-817-9829. That's 877-817-9829 because not all products are grown by nature, but they should be.
Do you suffer from anxiety, from depression, maybe even chronic pain? Well, listen up. Truth Be Told is going to tell you about a breakthrough program built on over 100 years of therapies used in America's returning veterans to help you successfully overcome PTSD, anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. The secret proven in study after study. Music therapy. The effects of music are nothing short of amazing. From strokes to PTSD, music has been shown to improve the quality of life. Now, one of the latest music therapy programs being used in America's veteran hospitals can be yours to experience for free at home and to help your own anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. Or just relax after a hard day. It's called Whole Tones. It takes music therapy to a new level. This revolutionary program makes use of specifically designed frequencies that have been shown to stimulate your body's natural healing power down to a cellular level. If it works for battle-scarred vets, can it work for you? Well, experience it for yourself for free at sweetwholetones.com. Like Tony Sweet, that's S-W-E-E-T. Go to sweetwholetones.com. Now enjoy the show. All right, we're back. This is Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Rachel Lang.
And I'm Captain Ron.
And we have Carl Johan Calleman on the phone, and he is calling in and talking about his latest book called The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, the Quantum Evolution of Consciousness. And I'm going to go ahead and let Captain Ron, take the first question.
Yeah, Carl, I wanted to ask you. I'm over 30 now. I'm
What, you are?
well over 30 now. And it seems to me like in my life, in my own personal little life, time is going faster. If I think of something that happened, if it happened 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden it's 20 years ago. Like, what do you mean it wasn't 20 years ago? That was like 4 or 5 years ago, I'll say to my friend. It couldn't have been 20 years. 20 years couldn't have passed. But don't you feel that somehow time is actually speeding up? Don't you feel that that's physically happening?
Well, that is one of the big predictions of the Mayan calendar, is the speed up of time. Physically, if you look at your watch, the time is not speeding up, and the planets are not moving faster than they have done for a very long time. But the whole thing about the Mayan calendar is really that it looks upon time in a different way. It's the time. It's what I mentioned before. It's the only calendar that is not based on the astronomical reality. And while the astronomical cycles keep on going at the same speed as they ever did, this system is not based on this kind of timekeeping that we're used to, and instead it is based on waves from the cosmic center that we're in resonance with, and which have different frequencies. And so the sixth wave that started in 3115, the wave period there is about 800 years, in the sum total of a peak and a valley. Then there's been 2 or 3 more steps up to the ninth wave that we're currently in, that was activated in 2011, where the wave period is only 36 days long. So what that means is that currently, since only a few years then, since 2011, our minds are being influenced by waves that have a tremendously much higher frequency of change than they previously did. And this goes back to the whole evolution of the universe actually has been speeding up all these times. But it's only now that we have reached the highest resonance frequency. And what that tells you is that, since you have this experience of time speeding up, it means that you have developed some kind of a resonance with this wave that was activated in 2011.
I've been trying to do that.
But even the one that was activated in 1999, it had a significant effect on people's experience of time, and that's really when people started to talk about this phenomenon of burnout, because there was a bunch of people that couldn't really cope with the high speed of life that was that particular wave brought to humanity. So that is exactly what should be expected. That we do experience a speed up of time compared to what used to be dominating before.
Well, like I said before we went to break, I really want to ask, and I agree. Time, I'm 46 now, and I feel like I was just 20.
10 minutes ago, yeah.
It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But before we went to break, I want to talk about how our brains receive consciousness, because being around psychics and intuitives and mediums almost on a daily basis, I kind of get it, but I'm fascinating to find out how you came up with your conclusions on receiving consciousness from the global mind, and could you explain what the global mind is?
Yeah. So I guess the best way of talking about that is to exemplify it. And this book deals very much with this sort of the initial rise of civilization that took place about 5,100 years ago. And what that meant was that people completely in different parts of the world who were not in contact with each other at the same time started to build pyramids. I think you mentioned earlier that maybe you can show images from my book, and that would be the image 1.2, figure 1.2. And what that shows is that at that point in time, when this particular wave was activated on our planet, people in different parts of the world at the same time, they've never built any pyramids before, but from this point and onwards, people start to build pyramids. And what I'm saying here, and what I'm basing it on, is really the description that the ancient Maya gave as to what happened at that particular point, because they basically said that, you know, a new global grid was downloaded that was based on straight and perpendicular lines. And what happened then is, you know, the result of that, the reality that people started to create, was that they started to build pyramids. They started to build cities. They started to organize life very much in around straight lines and the perpendicular lines. And what that shows, I think, to begin with, is that somehow people were independently affected by a new influence on the mind. And that tells us that the mind is not a product of the brain, because then people, you know, what this image shows is that people in Peru and Mongolia at the same time as in Egypt started to build pyramids. And it's a crazy idea in a sense, you know. I mean, we can admire these things, but from our modern perspective, we don't really understand why they would do it, but they still did it. And I would say they got the same impulse from the cosmos at that particular time, regardless of where they're living. And what that tells us in turn is that our mind, in this case a mind that was organized, a structured, intelligent, rational mind, creating buildings with immense precision, like the rich Egyptian pyramids. It happened independently, and so it meant that the mind is actually not coming from our brains. The mind is something that our brains are downloading, and it's actually coming from the cosmos and being mediated by the earth. And so regardless of where you live, you will have the opportunity to resonate with this new wave that is coming in, and the particular geometry that brings to the human beings.
Carl, would you call that God, or would somebody call that God, kind of? It sounds like it's almost like if it's universal.
Something in that order. I would say, you know, if you go to the ancients, if you go to the Egyptians or the Sumerians 5,000 years ago, they definitely felt that they got inspiration from the gods. And they said that this was a creation, a new creation by the gods, the people that are actually living at that particular time. And like the Sumerians, they had the goddess Inanna, who came with the gifts of civilization. So they were quite aware of what I would say was happening. But and I would say, you know, what happens when people download these particular waves is that they feel a divine inspiration behind it. Unless they would have felt a divine inspiration, they would. I cannot imagine then that they would have gone out to put all this energy into building pyramids of these huge sites. It must have been something that they felt like a very strong calling at that time, and meaning that a calling that came from something much higher, much broader, much bigger than the normal human concerns about life. And the word God has so many associations that maybe not be to the point. But yes, the intelligence of the universe is at operation in these particular waves, and you might say it is helping guide us to what we are to do in different time periods of our evolution.
Wow. And Rachel, I think you had some.
Yeah, I had questions just in terms of the pyramids. What did you find in your research about the grid lines and how the grid lines connect to frequency?
Well, the grid lines is, there's a lot of it that's in this particular book, and it's also based on the very fact that the Maya talk about this time 5,100 years ago as the time when the first father erected the world tree, which is really the source of geometry, and they talk about it as a global event, now it basically establishes the experience of the four directions, or actually the 8 directions, but at least the 4 basic directions of our planet. And I don't think that before this point in time people had an experience of the 4 directions. But now, because of the establishment of this grid line system on the planet, people actually started to experience it. And that's the reason that the Egyptians, that they, it's perfectly aligned with the northern direction, the North Pole, the true north, not the electromagnetic pole, but the North Pole, the Earth's rotational axis. It's something like 3 seconds of arc deviation from what is true, which is absolutely astounding. And the way I understand it is that when people originally then started to experience this grid system that covered the Earth, it existed in a very pure form. People became very strongly aware of it, that's what created this whole enthusiasm that they must have had at the time to build these kind of structures, but also to have these structures that they built be reflections of this invisible grid line system that then had been established on our planet when this wave was activated in 3115 BC. So the grid system of our planet, which really then is really the 4 directions, is the basis of this. It's not something that has always existed. It's something that came then at this point in time. And then you can see it's only after that point in time when you start seeing that people are doing these fantastically straight structures, and also that you're starting to see all these alignments that people were observing with the 4 directions when they built things. So it was a new thing, I think. It was a novelty. It was probably a very exciting time to be alive and be part of building these pyramids that really then was downloads of the global mind. The new structured geometry of the mind was downloaded. And what they did was they decided, okay, this is our new psychic reality. Let's go out and manifest it in this particular form. And their minds changed at that time, and that's what we see in how they created these civilizations. But just to come back to something that one of you said earlier with the issue of psychics and so forth, because with this understanding of the mind as something that we to some extent share, depending on what frequencies we're tuning into, that's a model for understanding why there is such a thing as psychics, why some people can tune into somebody else or somebody else's history or something like that. And the reason is that we're all connected through our common connection to the global mind. And that allows some people that have really developed a sensitivity for some of these particular frequencies of the mind to actually then be psychic and know things that is not really understandable just from a study from the physical reality. It really is making science of this connection that we all have, our minds all have, and that's part of that's the global mind. That's what that's what I think is one aspect that is very important for people to know about in this particular book. It is that it really goes into deep detail in explaining why we're all connected, and a lot of people, of course, experience it, but it's also very often helpful to actually have some kind of solid evidence and rational arguments behind these things that sometimes seem to go against what is the consensus view of reality.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left. And in those 5 minutes, and you guys may have another question, but I would like to know, as a scientist, not me, you, that being a scientist, most scientists go off fact. And finding the fact through your research, how did it change your life writing this book and finding the facts? What was Carl like before the book, and what was Carl like after the book?
Well, I think my own life then is very much a journey that is related to these different works that I do, writing books, and this is maybe my 5th book, and there is coming another book, a sequel to this book in December of this year called The 9 Waves of Creation, that goes much more into the future of humanity or the present situation of humanity, whereas the book we're talking about here, The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilization, is really to establish the understanding of the Mayan calendar system and really look at the past and understand how we've been affected by the past. And when you write these kind of books, you go deeper yourself into a topic than you do when you sort of in your everyday life, when you think a little bit about this, a little bit like that, or something like that. You actually have to tread new ground, and it's not for yourself, and then that would apply also to others. Hopefully, that's what you hope. And so it's been this 20 years or maybe 25 years soon of doing this kind of work and writing books and going into the Mayan calendar. It certainly has changed myself in many different ways, and I'm still very much relying on my way of looking at facts and scrutinizing facts that comes from my previous scientific training. But over time, certainly over these 25 years of time, not only have I forgotten pretty much all of the toxicology I once used to know, but I've also, come to be much more open over time to a lot of phenomena that I probably 25 years ago would have dismissed or yeah, so certainly it is, and this is all about these books that I've written. It's all about trying to explain in some kind of rational terms the connection between the divine source and human life and human destiny and human activity, and it's an ongoing thing, and it will also, and it's also called upon me in different ways to sort of try to influence the world to see what are actually the driving forces behind the world as it is today and in the past, and to the extent of my ability, then try to influence things for the better.
Wow. This has been a great interview, and I really appreciate you joining us, and definitely we'll have to have you back when the next book comes out. You say in December.
Yes.
But for the people that are wanting to get this book, you can go to Calleman, that's CALLEMAN.com, to Carl's website, or go to Amazon or pretty much anywhere. I'm sure you can buy a book. You can find it there. It's called The Global Mind and the Rise of Civilizations, the Quantum Evolution of Consciousness. And I think you're going to be very fascinated. And now you can kind of listen to the interview and read through the book at the same time, and try to, if you don't,
read it again and read it again and try to grasp it all.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but Carl, thank you so much for joining us.
All.
Yeah, you were great.
Thank you all of you.
You were
Tony,
great.
Rachel, and Rob.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right. Well, thank you guys again. Another great episode of Truth Be Told. And Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. Captain Ron, great to have you here. And we will be back next week, always here on ubnradio.com. If you missed this show or any previous, you can go to YouTube and look us up, Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. Please subscribe, leave a comment. We love to hear from you. People have been commenting. I said, if you have somebody you want us to have on the show, people have started to comment, and the people have left comments. I'm looking into those people. So, from
Very cool.
astrologers to psychics to people, archaeologists. So
Auto mechanics.
Yes, that maybe have a flying
Flying saucer.
Flying car.
flying car. Rachel, where do people find you?
Blissenup.com.
And Rachel is an intuitive astrologer. If you need one, she is the person to go to.
Thank you.
I've heard great things about you.
Thank you.
And you've given me my astrology chart before. Amazing. And Ron, like you said before, you don't have
I don't do that stuff, but you can find my show at IamDr420.com.
There you go. All right. Well, check us out on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and again, people that tuned in on ubnradio.com and Facebook Live. We appreciate it, and we hope to have you here next week, as always. So until then, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.